Point of order, Carmel Sepuloni.
Mr. Chair, I've just noticed for a couple of speeches tonight, and I just want clarification from you, that people have been reading their speeches during these stages. So just checking whether or not that is within the rules of what we're supposed to be doing during this debate.
Given the speech that's just been delivered, I was happy with that. Of course, I'm the judge of that. Thank you very much for pointing it out.
You're welcome.
I'll feel free to jump in any time if that's okay. Tracy Martin.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. I rise on behalf of New Zealand First to speak particularly on the areas of Education New Zealand and the New Zealand Qualifications Authority. If I can, and I pick up on some of the comments by Dr. Zhang Yang, the Chair of the Education and Science Select Committee, particularly around export education, which is covered by both Education New Zealand and by NZQA. And if I can just quote from NZQA's financial report, one of their key pieces of work is the administering of the Code of Practice for Pastoral Care of International Students, which involves working with other quality assurance providers and the International Appeal Authority and Review Panel to verify the code signatories performed as required and international students receive ethical and responsible care from their providers. Now, what I want to touch on here, Mr. Chair, is it's interesting. It's actually, Dr. Zhang touched on. There's actually, in 2014, there was 110,000 international students inside the post-secondary environment here in New Zealand. And just the universities alone made $883 million for that particular year off those students. And this is, Education New Zealand, for example, spent approximately $31 million on marketing overseas and so on to get those 110,000 students to come here to New Zealand. They were given a marketing opportunity by this government in the last few years, which was the ability for students to actually have 20 hours part-time work. Dr. Zhang quite rightly said that it has been extrapolated out that the export education industry has created 30,000 jobs in New Zealand. The government has handed out 70,000 part-time work visas. So if Dr. Zhang would like to do the math, New Zealand has actually lost by 40,000 jobs. 40,000 jobs have been taken from New Zealand students under the marketing ability of export education. So if we get back to the fact that export education spent $30 to $31 million of New Zealand taxpayers' money going overseas to promote export education, which, let me say this, is vital to New Zealand. It's vital to New Zealand. The reputation of that education is vital to New Zealand. What would the House think the state received back for that $31 million worth of investment? The state actually received $4 million return from the training institutions, not just universities, but all PTEs, all training institutions from Tier 1 to Tier 4 training institutions. Why we have Tier 3 and Tier 4 training institutions when our reputation is vital overseas, I have no idea, but perhaps the government could tell me. The government received $4 million return. That is because every training institution that receives a benefit from the $31 million worth of marketing pays $185 per year per institution. $185 per year per institution. That's what the New Zealand taxpayer received back for that investment. And apart from that, the fact that it is a woefully sorry return for the New Zealand taxpayer on the investment that they make, while at the same time supporting private businesses to gain a benefit from the overall New Zealand taxpayer dollar, there comes this issue of care, sir. In recent days, and this is where NZQA needs to step up, this is where NZQA's resourcing under these financial documents needs to be looked at quite strongly. What we've had from the AUSA, so the Auckland University Student Association, they have had a 96% increase in students coming to them over the last few months for food parcels, for legal aid, and so on. Now that's all students. A 96% increase in all students in January, February coming to them. What's very interesting is 55% of those people are international students. are international students coming to them for legal advice around sex for rent, international students coming to them for food parcels, international students coming to them for assistance in the workplace where they are being ripped off. And yet what we have is a lack of resourcing for NZQA to be proactive or to hold those PTEs, those private training providers, those universities who hold our reputation in the palm of their hand, that we have a lack of resourcing. Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair.
I'll call Tracy Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have a lack of resourcing by that department to maintain the level of reputation that we need for what is an incredibly vital service. So when New Zealand First raises these issues consistently around the abuse of international students inside the workplace, the abuse of international students inside, and particularly female students with the sex for rent scandal, why was there no noise? No noise from any member of the government or any government department where there was an investigation into the sex for rent scandal that happened up in Auckland. So that is a resourcing issue, sir. The other issue that we have, and I think is very interesting, and this is from the 2015 year, and this is a statement put out by the Right Honourable the Honourable Hekia Parata and Stephen Joyce. And the statement that they've said here is that in addition, New Zealand is one of only 9 OECD countries where salaries for experienced tertiary educated teachers compare favourably with salaries for people with equivalent qualifications in other occupations. The report shows that teacher salaries have risen in New Zealand faster in New Zealand than the OECD average since 2005. Why I bring this to your attention, sir, is because it relates to the financial documents, but there is, and it's the spin that is put on these financial documents. Dr. Zhang just spoke about how well the New Zealand education system because the national government has invested so highly in it. The national government underspent in special needs education. The national government has continued to fight for increased funding for all students. The national government has continued and is continuing to this day to put barriers in the way of extension for gifted and talented students and also for our special needs students. But what's interesting, sir, about the statements I just read is that I actually had research done to try and prove the statements that were put out by Hekia Parata and Stephen Joyce. The comments are, we cannot replicate the above statement with data. There is no data to support the statements made. So these again is what happens inside these reports and inside the conversations that this government talks about with regard to education. Statements are made, they go off just like water down the road, but there is no substance to those statements. One can say again and again and again that one cares and wants to get 5 out of 5 students over the line, and yet by not funding, by not spending, by making sure that the organisations, the government departments that should be proactive to keep the reputation of our education system intact, to make sure that they have the right funding, should be inside not only these financials but the financials going forward.
Todd Muller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.